Hey, good evening, everyone. ESS, Empire State Sports, proud presents the Wise Guys Sports Talk Show. Your host tonight, Joey Rio, I'm Dave Brown, myself, Pete Ghost, and our very special guest, Jake Roberts. Welcome to the program, Jake.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm really pretty honored that you had thought to reach out to me, and no one knows who I am, so thanks.
No one knows who we are either, so.
No.
All right. To the fans that are tuning in, the only reason we asked Jake on is we wanted to make this the baldest show that we've ever had. I think I'm winning. I'm not sure. But,
mission accomplished, Joey.
the other thing that, so we're going to talk to Jake about a lot of stuff here, but we've done, I think 108 shows is what I counted recently. 108 shows, 107 of them all sports related. I think the only show that we did, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, you might think of one that really wasn't sports related. We had Java Joel Murphy on, and we talked the radio and podcast business, and it was really cool. Tonight we are going to talk sports for a little bit, because we're going to talk a sport, and this is something we like to do. We're going to talk about a sport that we have not discussed at all in any of our shows, and that's always cool. And then we're going to really take it off the rails here and talk about some things that you probably wouldn't think Pete, Dave, and I are going to want to talk about. But I'm really excited about this. Jake is a longtime friend of mine. Anybody that knows me and Jake knows that we have a long history together. At some point, we'll probably talk about Lake Placid.
Steak by the lake.
We can easily talk about beer in Lake Placid.
We'll be able to do that.
Right now, Jake, why don't we start with what we do with most of our shows? Give everybody a little bio of yourself, a little pathway of where you started and what you're doing now, and we'll jump into the weightlifting stuff after that.
Okay, great. And again, guys, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. My name is Jake Roberts, as you guys have said. I've been a teacher, an English teacher in the area here in the North Country for almost 30 years now. And in that amount of time, I've obviously, you mentioned weightlifting. I spent about a dozen years as a competitive power lifter, starting when I was 29, I think, back in 1998. And and really have been involved in that sport, ever since then. The other thing that I started doing it, of course, having an interest in sports, I've trained a lot of athletes here in the North Country in terms of strength and conditioning over the years. And some of the names some of them you don't. I've trained every kind of athlete from lacrosse players and football players to even bodybuilders and one professional wrestler. So so it's really been a lot of fun being kind of plugged into the strength sports community. And so, yeah, I mean, I started lifting weights just in general when I was only 16. All of my friends were athletes. They were all bigger than I was. So I was trying to keep up, and I would train with them. And that's really when it all started.
Have they officially named a portion of the Maxey Hall Fitness Center in your honor? Because I mean, you've been going there for 30 years now, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been 30 years plus, actually, because let's see, I started, I graduated from SUNY Potsdam back in 92 or 93. And I of course, started training there as an undergrad. And I continued to work out in that gym, as you say, Joe, as pretty much a fixture at Maxey for the next 30 years, right up until COVID hit. And so it was really, I don't know how I did this. I kind of read the tea leaves, but those of you who are watching and have seen me at Maxey Hall, they allowed me to keep a little closet in the corner where I had all my own personal equipment, and they let me lock it up because I do a lot of work with Russian kettlebells. And even though it's like a gym, you can carry like a suitcase, you don't want to carry it because they're heavy. It's a cannonball with a handle on it. And I had a whole set of them that they allowed me to actually keep there at Maxey. And the day before they shut down, I kind of saw the way things were leaning, and I went down to the custodians, who obviously I knew after having been there for so long, borrowed one of their hand carts, went up in the elevator, loaded up all of my equipment, threw it in the back of my truck and brought it home. And then when everything was shut down, I had my gym here at home. So, and it's awfully convenient. So I've been doing that ever since. So that's pretty much my mode of exercise is the Russian kettlebell. It really helps with your conditioning. And I do have a full barbell set and power rack and so on here in my basement.
So I've seen video of you, Jake, with the kettlebells, and that inspired me as the athletic director. We got some for our fitness center, and the kids use them. When I first got them, they were looking at them like, what the heck are these for? And
what do you do with them, right?
Yeah. I showed your video that you had at that time
oh gosh,
they were like, wow. So some of our kids do use them, not as much as I'd hoped, but they do get used.
Oh, that's great. And, Joe, it's funny. A lot of the fitness centers in the schools across the North Country are now embracing, this new fad that's been around since the 1700s. It's one of the oldest modes of strength and conditioning equipment that's ever been around. And so there is a famous strength coach. He was a thrower back in the day in track and field. His name is Dan John. And he's one of the big gurus now of implementing kettlebells into the training of his athletes. And they call it, they couldn't figure out what was going on, because once they started doing it, suddenly their athletes were stronger, more agile, had better condition. It was just automatic suddenly. And they called it the what the hell effect, because they couldn't really put their finger on exactly what it was doing, but it was just introducing this one new mode of training, and it just made their results go through the roof. So if any of you coaches out there who are watching, if you want to implement just one tool that's going to make your athletes stronger and better conditioned and just all around better athletes, grab some kettlebells. Absolutely.
Okay, so what about the competitive side of it, Jake? How did you get involved in that? And kind of describe, is it a North Country thing? Is it a regional thing? Is it how far did you travel?
Oh gosh.
Is it tournaments? Is it leagues? How does competitive weightlifting go about?
Well, that's one of the things that I like to clear up every time I talk about the sport is, on the one hand, we know about Olympic weightlifting. What I competed in was actually powerlifting, which is actually a completely different sport. With powerlifting, you have the big three lifts. You have a squat, a bench press, and a deadlift. And you do a 1 rep maximum. You have 3 attempts at each lift. And then you can only, if you pick a weight, you pick a weight that you know that you can do. And when you get that weight, you can only move up. If you miss the weight, you have to stay there or move up. You can't go back. And so what you do is you get your best 3 lifts and you add up those numbers and you get a total for the 3 lifts. There's some competitions are not all 3 lifts. Sometimes they just have what's called a push-pull, where you do a bench and deadlift. Most meets were bench only, because everyone likes to see how much they can bench press. So I fell into it just because one of my good friends in college used to talk about it all the time. He used to be a big deadlifter. And so I had been training for quite a while. And then, I was looking for new goals when I turned 29. And I thought, well, maybe I started to see some bench press competitions. There was one in Carthage, New York, for example, another one in Oswego at SUNY Oswego. Then one after that was at actually in Ogdensburg in the Gold Dome. And so I went to the Carthage meet and completely bombed out. I had no idea what I was doing, but I learned a lot just by watching everyone there. And then the one after that, I didn't get any lifts in. But then I went to the one in Ogdensburg and I took first place in my weight class. At the time I was in the 165 weight class. I'll never see that again. But especially after gaining the COVID-19 over the last couple of years. A lot of empty calories going on there.
Hey, he's got a wise guys. Is that a wise guys?
It is indeed.
Beautiful.
Thanks, fellas.
Yeah.
Thanks, fellas. So, you know, that's how I got my start. And then when I was at that meet, I ended up meeting a group of guys who actually trained in Ogdensburg. And as it turned out, one of them ended up being one of the biggest powerlifting gurus here from New York State. And I learned more by training with him in just one session than I had ever learned up until that point of training with him. And so basically the way it works, so there were different federations at the time. The longest running powerlifting federation is the USAPL. And they have been trying for, 30 or 35 years to get the sport of powerlifting in the Olympics. But they just refuse to do it because people are confused about the difference between powerlifting and Olympic lifting. And so, you know, I get that. I totally understand. But then there were other federations that were popping up that were trying to make it actually a professional sport. Actually, down in Florida, it was on TV for a while. It's actually really entertaining to watch, especially some of these really big meatheads that you see on the platform. If you want to have some fun, and there is one video that I'm in the background in. And basically, I'm one of the spotters of a man named Gene Richlack, who has since passed away. But Gene was the first person to bench press over, get this, 1,000 pounds. And there were 5 of us spotting him that day, and I was one of them. You will see me on the left-hand side of the screen, crouched down like this under the weights with my arms up like this. I'm about the size of Gene's leg in that video. So you're talking about some very large, very powerful people.
How is it? Oh my God.
Well, you have to remember, there are 2 different modes of lifting. One is, it's called the raw category or raw division. That's where you're there. They'll let you wear a weightlifting belt, maybe some knee wraps on the squat, and that's it. There's also the equipped division, and I've competed in both over the years. Now, when you are equipped, you're wearing a bench press shirt that actually will compress your body and compresses you, and it's very hard to lower the weight. So what happens if you know how to manipulate it just a little bit, it will give you a little bit of a boost on the bottom, but you're still managing the weight, all the way up. So I competed in both. Gene was obviously equipped. He was wearing a bench press shirt that did assist in the lift because he knew how to use it really well. And so that's how you get to see a lot of those really big poundages. I was also on the platform and spotted another man named Glenn Shabbat. He broke Bill Kazmaier's bench press record. Kaz had benched 660 pounds raw benched, and Glenn did 675 that evening. And he did it with a closer grip on the bar too, which is very difficult to do. He was quite the specimen, I'll tell you that. Very, very intimidating looking individual, I'll put it that way. Yeah, over the years, all of these different divisions have cropped up and then fallen by the wayside. And so at this point, there really are only a couple left, and one of them is still the USAPL. And when it comes to that equipped equipment, the bench press shirt and the squat suit and those kinds of things, they only allow a very limited version of that. And so they're very strict about the types of equipment they allow people to use. So over the years, I've seen that one be kind of the best outfit in terms of its organization. The problem is that the other groups that had cropped up, they created what was called the amateur class and then the pro class. I was a amateur lifetime drug-free category lifter. That means in order to do that, if I set a record, instantly I would have a drug test. Okay, that way they knew in that division we were only training against other guys who were clean. The pro division, well, all bets were off there. And so that was nice in that division. The problem is with the USAPL, they don't have that distinction. They just say that everyone is drug tested, but I've never seen anyone actually fail a drug test, USAPL, unfortunately.
Huh. Okay.
So
Did you test positive for blue light?
I might have had a little bit of blood in my blue light system. I don't know. That was one of the funny things too, is that my training partners and I, when we would go to a meet, we would bring a cooler. And so we were in the lighter weight classes. So we would be done early, and then we'd sit there and drink beer and watch all the big guys lift the big weights. And or we would also, there was an occasional rum and coke going on there too. But the funny thing is, all of those big guys, they couldn't drink because they may have been on some sport enhancing substances that didn't allow them to drink. So it got to be a pretty funny little shtick that we did, where as soon as we'd get done, all of a sudden you hear us go psh, and pop open a beer and sit with her. And it got to be like a running joke with all of those guys. And you know, the cool part of the sport more than anything was the camaraderie, even amongst the different divisions, and even amongst the competitors. All of the guys in my weight class, when I was lifting, they were cheering me on, and when they were lifting, I was cheering them on, simply because the better you do, it forces them to do better, right? So the rising tide lifts all boats in that sense. And so that was for me the coolest part of that whole sport.
All right,
Well,
hold
go
on.
ahead, Pete.
So I'm gonna give you a little history of my weightlifting. And no, it's not 12 ounces and all this other good stuff. This is for real. Well, I went to college in the fall of '84 after I graduated, and I got into lifting a little bit of weights during the college years just to keep healthy. And when I got out of college, I went to work for my cousin in Rochester, New York, and I lived in a town called Honeoye Falls, New York. It's a suburb just a little bit south of Rochester. And across the road from me was a fitness center. And when you went in there, it was old school. It was all barbells, some pulley systems, no bikes. It was just raw. So,
That's the way it should be, in my opinion. But
yeah. We put the belts on, we wrapped our knees and legs to get a little bit more spring when we were lifting and stuff like that. So to make a long story longer, my powerlifting days were actually to help me during construction. When I was working construction, help me move stuff. And I got up to a point where they said, "Hey, Pete, why don't you just go to one of these weekend meets and just enjoy yourself. Go in and see what you can do." I had exceptionally strong legs. So I was squat. I was always on a squat rack or doing deadlifts. And one day I got up to the point of doing, you're probably not going to believe this, I had 715 on the bar.
I believe it.
And I've never attempted that before. I had 710 on. They threw a couple more. No, it was actually less than that because threw 2 5s on each side. And I went to squat. And when I was lined up, I was lined up off center, and I didn't know about it. Of course, everybody's, you know how it is in these gyms. Everybody's getting the power, and they're all and I grabbed the bar and I put it on my shoulder and I get it off the rack, and I went to go down, and I realized I was tipping. And being a dummy that I am, instead of letting it drop, I tried to push it back up.
Oof.
Needless to say, I was singing soprano for about 2.5 weeks. I think you understand what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you mean.
I never squatted after that. To be honest.
Well, I believe it. I believe it. And
it hurt so damn hard that I didn't squat again. I went in and I did the pulley systems and stuff like that to keep,
Sure.
my strength up for construction. But that's my story. So that's about as far as I got right there.
You know, Pete, I mean, it's a very common story. I mean, the number of accidents and injuries I've seen over the years, I've lost track. You know, sometimes there's a misload and one side has an extra plate on it or something, and then you see it go all off kilter like that. At one meet, the loaders of the weights, one guy was pulling all the weights off from one side, and the guy on the other side wasn't keeping up, and so then all of a sudden you see the bar whiplash, and 100-pound plate landed on the other guy's foot.
Oh,
That was a nice little pancake foot going on there, and there have been a lot of examples of the spotters missing the weight. That was one of my things. After I was done lifting, usually I would help out with the spotters and so on. And there's a very special training that goes on with you're spotting, heavy lifters. If you do it correctly, they can't get hurt. If you're not paying attention, you don't do it correctly. I've had 410 pounds bounce off my chin when I was bench pressing. And it landed on my neck, and I was wearing a bench press shirt, and I had it like this. And one of the judges and a couple of the other guys, one guy ran out of the audience and to help pull it off my neck. It can happen very, very quickly. And so, yeah, Pete, I think that's, a real good cautionary tale for you to tell there, because unfortunately, it's a more common experience than what you would think.
yeah. We used to mark our bars with chalk.
Right.
So I knew where my hands were supposed to be positioned, and I knew where my neck was supposed to be lined up. And for some reason, I had my hands right, and I didn't go underneath it properly, and that was it. So,
yeah,
but that's my story.
It's a good one.
Well, just like you just said, Jake, I was just thinking, I said that probably happens, especially in competition, more often than we would think, because you're always trying to outdo what you've already done, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And you're always looking for chasing that PR, that personal record, your personal best. And so, I mean, that was the one time when I, the spotters, missed it with me. And I had one failure that the spotters did help me with the, I think it was a 500-pound squat attempt at 165. That was back before I could actually do that much. And I kind of collapsed under it, but they caught it, and so as being someone who was always in a supportive role after I was done lifting before the beer started, I was always spotting, and we were very careful about training others of how to spot properly and correctly. So yeah, it's something that does happen. And it's funny because it's a sport that has actually diminished in popularity, unfortunately. When you see the advent of CrossFit right now, the CrossFit Games, for example, the way a lot of the people are training now is well, it's not smart training at all. And if you have anyone out there who is interested in doing CrossFit, the one suggestion I would make is this is from a world-class trainer by the name of Pavel Tsatsouline. He was he was credited with bringing the Russian kettlebell here to the States. And he talks about the idea of what he calls strong first, that as long as you get strong, strength is the vessel in which we have all of our other physical attributes. And so what that means, if you think of your strength as the size of a glass, you can pour more conditioning into it, okay, and increase your conditioning that much more. So the more he always forced people to get strong first, and then he'd say, okay, now we're going to condition the muscles you have, instead of just conditioning people until they're like a wet noodle, and then try to build them up. He says that doesn't work. You have to get strong first, and then all of those other elements you can explore. And unfortunately, that CrossFit promotes a method of training that doesn't do that. They follow what's called a WOD, workout of the day, And the whole point of it is to just kind of bash them down in the dirt and, to really wear them out completely. And the problem is that your body can only respond to one stimulus per workout. And what they often do is they will do ballistic lifts, grind lifts, which is hard, strength training, but then they'll do a hardcore conditioning element too. And so your body doesn't know how to react to any of those things. And what happens is you'll end up shutting down your CNS, your central nervous system. And when it comes to strength training, a lot of people don't realize that what you're really doing is you're training your central nervous system more than you're actually training your muscles. And so, like I said, you're seeing a lot of these sort of other sports coming to the fore, but the way they train isn't as smart as the old school powerlifters were. So that's just my one.
I wanted to say one thing, going back to spotting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I would be in the gym, I always hated seeing the guys over, on the bench press, and then one of them stands up and starts looking around. Because I'm 6'5", 310. Okay. And as soon as
buddy, you want to give me a spot?
Hey, you want to give me a spot? And I'm like, yeah, okay. But I was always worried because I thought, there's more to it than just standing there saying, all you, man, all you.
Yeah. Because if all of a sudden the guy can't do it and it isn't all him, it's going to be all you.
Right.
Believe me, I know.
Luckily, knock on wood, I never had a problem. And anytime there was somebody who couldn't quite finish out the rep, I didn't have to lift the whole weight off them.
Right.
But I'm only thinking, well, what happens? Because I'm a big guy, but I'm not a big lifter, you know. So just because I'm big doesn't mean I can lift that weight off your chest if you get.
It's so true. It's so true, Dave. It's what's funny is when you see those guys doing that and you try to avoid eye contact because they're looking and say, "Oh, that guy looks strong. I bet he can lift this off me." But I really don't want to.
Every time.
Well, Dave, that's when you walk in the gym with a cigarette dangling, and
there you go.
So nobody picks you.
Genius.
All right. Well, that was some pretty thorough weightlifting stuff. Any more questions on the weightlifting, guys, before we move on?
No, I'm tired of talking about it. I'm not 20 anymore, so I guess.
Neither am I.
No.
I'm inspired to go to the. No, never mind.
To the bar?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, okay.
The CrossFit stuff.
Hey, the coolest thing about Old Forge is the gym and the bar are in the same building.
Same building. That's true. We had a lot of powerlifting meets in that arena, so it was a lot of fun.
Oh, cool.
Bar. Oh, that's nice. That's like a bowling alley then. It's like
it actually
I can't bowl, but I can drink. Yeah.
It originally was a bowling alley.
Yeah.
Then they divided it in half, the gym and the brewery on the other side. And the brewery's putting in a golf simulator. So, it's.
Oh, cool.
Well, there, we got a reason to go down to Old Forge then, Jake.
There you go. If we must, we must.
All right. Well, I don't know how to dive into the next things that we're going to talk about here, but Jake has his own podcast. It's on is it Facebook Live? You do this, right, Jake?
I do it through a thing called StreamYard, where I can actually broadcast it directly to Facebook and YouTube at the same time. So you can find it on both Facebook and YouTube.
Okay, so why don't we lead into it this way and discuss what your podcast is about? And is that a tough?
No, it's just.
Is that going to be tough?
Oh, the segue we got going here.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying, the reason I react that way is like, okay, prepare to be bored.
Yeah.
You don't get much nerdier than this. We can kind of go the Curse of Oak Island route if you want, but some friends of mine that one of my good friends was actually on the show, The Curse of Oak Island. And when he was on it, he said a certain phrase. And when he said that, I'm like, I need to call him, because I mean, he's a friend of mine. So I called him. I said, hey, you used the phrase the Royal Arch, and here's what I think is going on there. Because I knew about the symbolism of Freemasonry and those kinds of things. It's been an area of interest of mine for, as long as I've been lifting weights, actually. Totally unrelated, I know. But so next thing you know, we start talking, and then we sit down together and have a beer and talk about it. And I said, well, this is what I think is going on. He says, well, you should really write that up and send it into the guys and see what they think. He said, that's a pretty good idea. So I did. And next thing you know, I long story longer, I ended up being involved in some Oak Island research for the Curse of Oak Island. I ended up doing 2 war room presentations. You'll never see them on TV. They're just way too nerdy out there. But in the process, what originally happened was if you're familiar with the show, there's another researcher. His name is Christopher Morford. And he was on with Corey and Mall, who's a little more famous. And I got to know Christopher pretty well, and we were sharing ideas back and forth. And he and my friend Chris Dona were looking at the plaque that is on, okay, this is where it gets nerdy. It's on the funerary monument of William Shakespeare in Holy Trinity Church in Stratford upon Avon. And it's a really weird looking plaque. It has this little verse on it, a little poem. And I looked at it, and because they were studying it, they thought there were clues to Oak Island there. And I looked at it, and Chris Morford had identified a perfect right triangle on it that spells out the name Bacon, as in Sir Francis Bacon. And I said, well, that's cool. But I looked at the plaque and I thought, there's something else going on there. And I looked at the features of it, and I immediately knew what kind of cipher was there, that there's a cipher encoded in it. And so I always said, someday when I get time, I'm going to decode that thing. I think I know how to do it. And then all of a sudden, with the quarantine lockdowns in place, I had all kinds of time on my hands. I said, well, I guess now's a good time to try to do this. And it worked. Basically, once I started seeing all of the messages that were Francis Bacon had encoded in that plaque, he made it. I was blown away, and I totally forgot about the Curse of Oak Island. I was like, oh, I got to do more. This is so cool. And I kept decrypting it. And then I got to this one section. It was I was drawing a complete blank, and I thought, what in the heck? And then I saw the word, because the way it works is you look for words in the cipher that will give the context to the whole thing. Usually there's a whole word there, and you can pull it apart. And then once you get the context, you can start piecing together the other words in the jumble of letters. And I was looking right at this one word the whole time, and it was Arcady, which is a version of Arcadia, the original name of Nova Scotia. And when I saw that, I thought, maybe there is something there. Instead of just, could it be? It could be. And so that gave the context, and suddenly I unraveled an entire message about Oak Island, Nova Scotia. And so that's kind of what led me to really researching and getting into Sir Francis Bacon and all of the different kinds of things that he was into. He was a spy, and what a lot of people don't know is he was a privateer, a pirate. One of his best buddies, Sir Walter Raleigh, was doing the same thing. I made a bunch of discoveries about that. And so I decided I'd start doing a podcast to promote my book, and that's called The Holy Trinity Decryption. I do have an Oak Island book out there. I just pulled it because I found more information on Oak Island. And so I'm rewriting a book right now.
Is that why you can't find it anywhere?
Yeah. And
okay.
I pulled it. The other book is still there.
Yeah.
The big one. But if you give me another month or 3 weeks or so, it'll be back with more information in it that's even more astounding. Let's put it this way. You're going to appreciate this, Dave. I found a map that actually tells the exact location of the original location of the money pit.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you might want to tell somebody because these guys can't find it.
I know.
Yeah, I'm okay. Let's talk about this a little bit, Jake. Number one, I'm a Mason.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I know that history, and I know about looking at words and deciphering word, like you said, where they could
Sure.
go two different avenues.
Absolutely.
We watch Oak Island here. Okay, I'm going to try not to swear here, but it irritates the shit out of me that they can't find anything, and all of a sudden we go, now we got to wait till next week. They dragged this thing on so long. They could have had this series done in a month.
You're preaching to the choir there, brother.
You know what I mean?
I know it.
It's like a damn soap opera. It's like, I wonder what's going to go on this week. Oh, they're digging another hole.
How long?
And they found more wood.
Yeah.
Hey, how long have they actually been there?
I want to say almost 14 years now. I mean, the show has 9 seasons, but
Right.
they had been there for a while before Prometheus Productions got a hold of them and said, "Hey,
I figured that they had to have at least done something to make it worthy of a show. Not we're going to do this show. Let's go here now and we'll start the show."
Yeah.
And yeah, that would be like what's the Al Capone's
Vault from Geraldo.
Yeah, from Geraldo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like that. Yeah, well,
we get irritated to the point, Jake, that it's like, all right, that's it. I'm done watching this freaking show. It's irritating me. And then the next week comes on. You ready for Oak Island?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's something you get. It's like a train wreck that you can't turn away from. You got to watch it.
It is. Well, you know what? I feel the exact same way. I know it seems counterintuitive, but when I first started watching, I just loved all of the Freemasonry, Rosicrucian, and Knights Templar, history, and
That's
all
what
of this.
turned me on to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what turned me on to it. Yeah, and because I've always been into that stuff, and I never believed for a second, not 1 second, that there was anything in the money pit. I was very skeptical of it.
We were whoever was there is gone now.
That's what I figured.
Mhm.
Then I wasn't even taking it seriously until season 6 when my friend Chris was on, and they found actual scientific evidence of things that were built in the 1600s there, and that really grabbed my interest. I'm like, well, that makes more sense to me, and so they could scientifically prove that something happened there. The problem with the show that I have is what we see from production, from the producers of the show, Prometheus. What we see on that show is just usually a tiny fraction of what people go in there and explain in the war room situation. And I knew that my presentation would never see light of day because I was explaining how I was taking all of the letters of the plaque and rearranging them using an algorithm, right? That produced the messages, and then you rearrange them again and it produces a new message. And so I knew how that was going to come across. And I knew that, the producers, they're looking at me, they say, and this is the cool part. This is my one claim to fame. Marty Lagina, the skeptic on the show, stopped me dead. Like when I halfway through one of my explanations, and I thought, oh shit, here it comes. Because he's the skeptic, right?
Yeah.
He goes, he says, Jake, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Just keep going. You got it, man. And I kept going. So that was my, a huge compliment in my mind. But I knew, he got it. He understood it. The producers didn't understand. So I said, well, if they can't understand it, they're not going to be able to put it in a way that's going to make sense on TV. So at least I gave them the information, and they did check out the location I suggested. The problem is that every theorist who puts an X on the map for them, we usually do it using Google Earth. Google Earth is off from 2 to 5 meters.
Yep.
In terms of putting an X on the map. If they're going to drill a hole this big, you only need to be off by 1 meter or 1 foot. And so it's an impossible task to give them a precise location. using those tools. But now they have that Muon technology. Now they have, this ground penetrating radar that they just carry. I was talking to the guys on the end, and that is super powerful. So they are like starting to check out some other areas. But the problem I have with it is that the real curse of Oak Island for me is that I turn my back on the research of it. I'm like, this is a huge waste of my time. I have no incentives to do this for you guys, honestly. It's starting to detract and take away from my own research of all this information I'm finding out about Sir Francis Bacon and who he really is, who his parents really were. It wasn't Lady Anne and Sir Nicholas Bacon. He was a foster child, and he was royal, and his mother was not Queen Elizabeth I, the way everyone thinks. So, I'm finding all of this information about, that is just so cool to uncover when suddenly you start seeing all of these connections between these historical figures that when I first started doing this, I hardly knew who any of these people were. But now, just because of the information that comes out, and the latest information. So I had turned my back on it. And then as I'm researching Sir Francis Bacon, all of a sudden, here's this map that I find. And where does it lead? Oak Island. And I'm like, son of a, I'm like, are you serious? I was done with this, but it brought me back. And so that's why I pulled my second book, so I can include that information. I'm almost done with the editing right now. So it could be as early as this week, but it's probably going to be a couple weeks.
Cool.
So, but the idea that there was ever anything in the money pit, the reason I never believed that story, and Pete, maybe about this, because it's a retelling of the Royal Arch degree of Freemasonry, where they act out what's called the legend of the three Sojourners. And this is where there were three men who were journeying back to Israel from captivity. And King Zerubbabel was going to rebuild Solomon's temple.
Oh.
And they go to him and they say, we need a job. And he says, okay, you're hired. I want you to go, clear the area. Let's find where the original temple was. And they clear away some debris and find a hidden keystone. They pull the keystone up, and then one of them gets lowered down into a chamber. And then at the bottom of that chamber is another keystone. He pulls that one up, they lower him down again. They do this 9 times. Okay, how many levels are in the money pit? 9, right? How many guys found it? 3. So this told me that the story of the original finding of the money pit was really embellished a lot in order to retell that same exact story. And so in my mind, I was just thinking, well, there's nothing there. And the whole thing about the 90-foot stone and that cipher, that's a bunch of nonsense as far as I'm concerned. Because at the very bottom of that 9th level of the chamber under Solomon's temple, they find a golden triangular tablet with the ineffable name of God inscribed upon it. The Tetragrammaton is what it's called. And at the bottom of the money pit on the 9th level, they find the 90-foot stone with these strange symbols carved on it. And no one's ever really seen the real stone, as far as we know. There's no provenance for the symbols that you see on TV associated with it. And right. So
the stone they found was smooth.
Yes. Yep. And so I don't know. I think that that whole part of it, one of the things that I discovered was, there are certain tropes on that show that are almost sacred. One of them is Nolan's cross, for example. And in my original theory, I debunked that whole idea because Fred Nolan moved some of those giant boulders to put in the shape of a cross. It was not originally a cross. And I was able to figure out where they originally were. And so, when you start messing around with those kinds of things, these are the fan favorites, so to speak. I doubt I'm going to be on TV anytime soon. Let's put it that way. But like I said, I turned away from it because I was just throwing up my hands. I'm like, I'm so tired of this. they have my information. There you go. Look for it. Hopefully it's there. But then all of a sudden, as I'm researching, boom, here's this map, and it points right, puts an explicit X right on the map. And
Every time I
guys
try to get out, they bring me back in.
suck me back in. That's right. It's a vortex. And so if I were to show you guys the location of the original money pit, your jaws would hit the floor. I'll put it that way. I'll put it that way.
Uh-huh.
I got a shovel. I got a shovel somewhere here. I'm gonna start digging.
Well, the thing is, one of the episodes, Marty Lagina made the comment that that if it were up to him, they wouldn't drill in the original money pit because there's nothing there. He believes in the theory of the offset chamber. And according to what I just found, I think he's spot on correct.
Okay.
And I have a location for that too. So it's kind of fun. We'll see. We'll see if anything comes of it.
All I know is that they got to be making money off this show because
Well, Prometheus.
it's driving me to drink. I mean, it's just I need no.
Laginas aren't hurting for money to begin with.
No, you gotta. These guys have big construction firms and engineers, and they got money. But most of this is on grants, correct, Jake?
Some of it is. I mean, Prometheus foots the bill for some of it actually, but most of it is coming out of Marty, Rick, and Craig's pockets. Some of it is the archaeology stuff that they're doing. They do have grants from Canada for that, I believe. But Marty and Craig had I believe it was an oil and gas company because they're both engineers, and they both sold it, and they both ended up with $500 million in their pockets. So they've done quite well for themselves. And as far as the people, Prometheus Productions, I mean, this is definitely one of their best produced shows that they air, and it's by far their most popular. So they don't want it to end anytime soon. I know that.
All I know is if I hear, "Oh, that's a Bobbly Dazzler," one more time, or "That's a true pocket find," or top pocket find. Yeah. If I hear that one more time, I want to puke. And you can see where listen.
He's one of my favorites.
He is, but you can see where the ground was disturbed before he runs this thing over it. And so, what do we got here? It's like, come on, man, you just put it down there 2 minutes ago before the camera came on.
There are a lot of.
I don't doubt they're finding stuff, but right. But it's amazing how they got this played right out, though.
Yeah, and well, right now, if you don't have a theory if you have a theory and it does not involve the Knights Templar, they're not going to look at it. They're not going to. I mean, that's what the show wants on TV, and it's really pretty unfortunate because were they there? I don't know. I don't have any evidence to support it. And people have asked me about, well, Jake, what about the lead cross? Hello, that was from that time period. It was the lead comes from southern France. I said, yeah, that's true. I said, they have definitively proven it. Was that lead cross a Templar artifact? Yeah, I think it probably was. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that a Templar dropped it there.
No,
those are two completely different things. This is one of the things that bugs me most about just the show in terms of their narratives. Okay, they don't follow the rules of logic. Every time they say, could it be? That's a fallacy of logic called hypothesis contrary to fact. They're making stuff up that sounds good. Could it be that? What? No, we don't know. So I'm. This is why Marty Lagina and I, kind of hit it off, was because I need facts. I need to follow logic. You know what I mean? And that's the type of guy he is. And in my presentations, I anticipated all of his questions, which he really liked. And so, because I have to connect the dots, I have to have facts, and the way they tell the story of the show, I'm right there with you, Pete. It gets old after a bit, but then again, I still keep going back and watching.
Yeah. It's like a train wreck. You just can't turn away.
Right. Before we wrap up, I got one other question. It's not Oak Island related per se, but Francis Bacon.
Yeah.
Right. Where do you stand on the Francis Bacon is the actual author of all of Shakespeare works?
Well, I know for a fact he was, because
Okay.
I read his message that said so.
Okay.
That plaque, it's called Shakespeare's plaque is what people call it, but it's the plaque of the Funerary monument of William Shakespeare. And that plaque is a document that he left behind, and encoded within the cipher messages of that plaque, he states that he used the name Shakespeare. He wrote Shakespeare. Yeah. 100%. And and the problem is that there are still a lot of people who think, oh no, it was Edward de Vere and all these other people. And I said, well, where's your document that says so?
Right.
Nobody has one. And so the information is out there now, and I just hope that more people hear it and see it. It's one of the things that I keep repeating on my podcast, and I'm starting to get the attention of all the people that hate that message. So I'm catching a lot of flack. That means I'm over the target. So I'm pretty happy about that. The other thing too was who his true parents were. That was the shocker. His mother was actually Mary, Queen of Scots, and his father was Francis II of France.
Mm-hmm.
And that historians, howled when I first said that, because they said, "Oh, there's so many reasons why that can't be true." And I said, "Well, name one that is factual."
Yeah, right.
And they couldn't. They could not name one that was historically factual. I said, I have the message, and it repeats a lot in so many different areas. And that's what I've been working on in my second book called The Ghosts of Bacon, is just pulling together all of that evidence and just listing it. And once you see it from all of these different sources, from maps, paintings, portraits, covers of books, woodcuts, it's everywhere. He made sure it was encoded everywhere. It's really pretty cool.
And one last real quick, to bring it back to Oak Island, are the original writings in a chest soaked in mercury, buried underneath all this?
Well, I think so, because he wrote extensively how to do that. And the messages where he states what he left in his treasure chamber. There's more than one, by the way. He says that his first folio, his RC first folio, Rosie Cross first folio, that's Shakespeare. His royal birth records, or as he calls it, Her Royal Majesty's files well tell I'm Mary Stuart's son. So his birth records are there. And so, yeah, all of his original writings, the first folio, as well as other important documents, and apparently a pile of gold, in his words.
Wow.
So the other message I recently found from the Bacon Funerary Monument, not the Shakespeare, was that Francis Drake left a secret deposit on an island in Arcadia. And that's messages right there. And they also name the island, and through Bacon's sources, I've since learned that they were referring to Oak Island as the island of the sea lions, or the lions of the sea. Lions of the sea were what some guys were calling themselves as Danish privateers. But it was actually Bacon, Drake, and Sir Walter Raleigh, in my opinion. So that was their island. That's where they stashed stuff.
Cool.
Jake, we've been talking for an hour. This
It doesn't seem like it.
no, and I was thinking tonight, it's like we aren't going to learn a damn thing tonight. And
I knew better.
Huh?
I knew better.
No, I'm kidding. Because when Joy was telling me originally, he says he's coming on to talk about weightlifting. I said, well, that's good for about 15 minutes. What else we get to talk about? And then he started talking about the Bacon thing, and I'm going, well, I know a little bit about this as it pertains to masonry.
Right.
So I wonder how much you're going to bring up. So this has been such an informative hour. We could make up another show and go further. So at this time, I'm going to ask you, would you like to come back on again, Jake?
Oh, 100%. I loved this. This was a great time, guys.
Great.
I mean, I enjoy watching your show anyway, and to be on it now is this is a hoot. I loved it.
Good. Well, I tell you what, I've learned a lot in the last hour, not only the weightlifting, but it's nice to hear the things that I've been reading for years. And what we go through our, I don't know how I want to call them, our scenarios inside the lodge.
Sure.
Things that we talk about. So anyway,
That's great.
I know we would want to talk about so much more. And this is the quietest I've ever seen Joey.
Me too, actually.
Huh? Yeah.
Me too, yeah. And like you said, we've known each other a long time.
I know.
There's something that he can't tell me that I already haven't heard, but that aside, so I wanted you two to have that.
Yeah, well, we had at it. The only way that make this better if we were in a bar somewhere talking about it. So
Yeah, that's a fact. We could always make that happen at some point.
yes, we can. Yes.
Well, Jake, I told Pete and Dave before we came on, I said, in my long history, and Pete and Dave didn't know who you were. I've never mentioned you before until tonight, but they know who Ogsy is. They know who Whitey is. They know who Normie is. And when I told them that you were in my top 5 of beers with me, this guy, you've never mentioned him before. Yeah,
really.
Jake and I go back a long way.
Long time. One of our favorite. Before we go, I just want to give Joey a shout out for the best bar trick he and I ever used to do. Is we'd be sitting at the bar back in our single days, and a lovely young lady might be sitting next to me, and I would turn and I would strike up a conversation, find out her name, and I would introduce her to Joey and say, "This is so and so." And since he worked for the post office for so many years, he would turn and look at her and say, "Oh, you live over on Pierpont Ave, Third I like your dog." It just, it watched her.
Stalker. That's stalker stuff right there.
Yeah,
conversation over.
That's pre-cell phone days too, Pete. So yeah, it was total freak out mode. It really worked.
It was awesome. It was so much fun.
Well, I would love to talk some more, Jake, but our time is up for tonight. But we will have you on again.
Great.
All right. Well,
thanks so much, guys.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Folks, that's going to be it for tonight for ESS, the Empire State Sports and the Wise Guys Sports Talk Show. For Joey, Dave, and myself, we want to thank Jake Roberts for coming on. And good night, everybody, and stay safe.